Welcome to this training on fire extinguishers. This is going to give you a brief overview of the different types of fire extinguishers, when to use them, when not to use them, and general inspection points that you want to look at on a monthly basis. These are the kinds of things that we see everywhere, but we probably have never looked at one as far as, okay, when I got to use it, do I know how? It seems simple. It actually is simple, but in the heat of the moment, if we haven't thought about it, practiced with it, looked at it, it can be quite overwhelming. So hopefully we can try to get rid of some of those fears or trepidations people may have of using a fire extinguisher and know the proper use and when to use one. The main functions of the fire extinguisher are to put out small fires. They call them incipient stage fires, very small fires. Nothing too huge because the fire extinguisher obviously small, can only put out so much fire. It's also there to help protect the evacuation routes of occupants within a building so they can get out. We'll go over some concerns and some safety things as we go through this training so that you're aware of them if you ever are called to use one. OSHA gives you and NFPA gives you different definitions for incipient stage fires. Basically, it's a small fire. Anything bigger than a small area fire is not going to be able to be handled with that, and also could put the person using the fire extinguisher in danger. So, looking at this picture, what do you think? Go at it with a fire extinguisher? Yeah, no. Hopefully, it's pretty obvious you're not going to put a fire out like this with a fire extinguisher. It's obviously well involved, too big to use a fire extinguisher to even do much of anything to. So that's one of the things that we need to determine when we see the fire. Is this going to be a fire that we can use an extinguisher for, or is this one we just want to turn around and run the other way? This is what we're talking about. A small trash can fire. It could be an incipient stage fire that could be put out with a fire extinguisher without much problem. Again, knowing how to use it and the correct procedures for using it prior to actually discharging the agent to put the fire out. But just so we have some perspective of the type of fire that we're going to be able to put out. There's what's called the fire tetrahedron or the fire triangle. Both of these are images that allow us to understand what is needed to actually have a fire. And if we know what components are there to have a fire, if we take one of them away, the fire will go away. This is where the fire extinguisher comes in. It takes a portion of one of these away from the actual fire in order to extinguish it. We have fuel. We need some type of fuel to burn. Wood, gasoline, anything like that, materials, plastics that can burn is our fuel. Now, some fuels are easier to ignite and give off more heat and can burn faster than others, but we need some type of fuel. We need heat. This could be in the form of a spark, an ember, a lighter, a match, any type of heat source that brings the fuel to the point where it can be ignited. We also need oxygen. Just like we need oxygen to breathe, fires need oxygen to live as well. They need oxygen, fuel, and heat together, and this is what's traditionally called the fire triangle. And then we add the uninhibited chain reaction, where chemicals coming together can continue that fire process, or heat being transferred from one molecule to another continues that process along until it's broken somewhere along the way to extinguish the fire. So if we can remove one of these aspects of the fire will go out, and we'll see how the fire extinguishers do that. Examples of heat sources, we talked about a few. Lighters, matches, static electricity, electrical spark, lightning, an ember from a cigarette. Any of those could be heat sources, and there's many, many more. Fuel examples, we have some solids there, we have some liquids, we even have gases, all of which are flammable and good fuel sources that will continue a fire going. So let's look at an example. This is just an office setting, average furnishings that are in there, but what type of fuel sources, what types of things are in there that could potentially burn? Now there you go, all kinds of things. Anything in there could be brought to a point where it will burn. If it's hot enough, if there's a long enough consistent heat source to that fuel, it will end up burning eventually. Some things take longer than others. Some things take years, and over time, as things start to break down, that can make it even easier for these things to burn. Obviously, like we said, some things burn faster and quicker than others. The solid wood versus paper. Obviously, two different speeds with which they'll end up burning, even though it's usually not solid wood anymore in desks. What types of fires are out there? We have them broken down into different classifications. We have class 1, or ordinary combustibles, paper, wood, cloth, any other debris, sodas, cups, trash, all types of ordinary combustibles. Campfire could be considered an ordinary combustible with your logs. So that's what a basic ordinary combustible fire is. Class B is your flammable liquids, gasolines, oils, diesel fuel, any type of liquid that's flammable. We have Class C, or electrical fires. These are ones that produce some type of electrical current. They could be appliance, they could be wires, anything that has electricity within it. We also have Class D, or flammable metals. These can include magnesium or aluminum or common flammable metals that you see out there. They will burn. Even though they're metal and they're solid, they will burn. And a lot of people have this picture in their mind that, God, it's solid, it's metal. It's not going to burn. Yeah, it actually will. And it can burn with some significant power, which we will see in one of our videos at the end. There's also Class K, or cooking grease fire. We all like to go to Applebee's or Olive Garden or our local establishments and get fried foods. Well, they got to get fried up in grease, and that grease can be flammable, especially if it has enough of a heat source that can ignite that. I can remember my first fire as a non-firefighter, before I was even firefighter, was at a Class K type cooking grease fire. The heating element didn't stop heating. There was a malfunction there, and the grease actually ignited. So this is another type of potential fire that is out there. Now, with all the different types of fires, we need different types of extinguishers that will help put them out. There are a bunch of different ones out there with a bunch of different agents inside them that will extinguish the fire, but we got to match the agent with the type of fire. Herein lies the pictures that you'll see on all fire extinguishers telling you what fires they will and what fires they won't be able to put out. You have the 6 types there, A, B, BC, ABC, K, and D, and then you have the pictures over there on the right. Your one with the trash can, that's your Class A, or ordinary combustibles that we talked about earlier. You have the one with the gas can, that's your flammable liquids. The one with the electrical plug there for the Class C, or energized electrical equipment. And then you have your D, well, Class K there you can see with a pan with a fire in it, and then below that the Class D, or your flammable metals. These are the pictures that will allow you to know, hey, yeah, you can use the extinguisher for this, or you can't. You also may see the lines through it up top there, where it won't, the top one will do ordinary combustibles, but it won't do flammable liquids or electrical. So you could see either or on your fire extinguisher, what it can do or what it can and cannot do. You need to look at this or understand this prior to doing or trying to extinguish a fire, so you make sure you put the proper agent on it. Let's take an obvious one, electrical fires. Mom told you ever since you were a little kid, hey, water and electricity don't mix. So we don't want to probably grab a water extinguisher on an electrical fire. We're going to end up getting electrocuted. So we want to make sure that the agent is going to be the correct one for our needs. We'll go through a couple of these, or the different types, and kind of break it down a little bit. The Class A extinguisher, not just water, but water is the agent we're showing in this particular one. And you can see why in this particular one, the Class A is water, and it won't do flammable liquids or electrical. However, we'll show you one that can do a Class A and do some of the other ones. Again, it's dictated by the agents used to extinguish, in this case water. Class BC, this is where we use a gas. We use carbon dioxide to actually take away the oxygen factor of the fire tetrahedron triangle to put the fire out. We kind of smother it. Now this is for a B and C. Could it potentially put out some A-type fires? Yes, but it's coming off with a gas that's under pressure and that can actually spread a Class A fire depending upon the materials, the burning, the ash, and make the fire bigger. That's why they're showing you the BC. Multi ABC, this is where you're going to have a dry powder, mono ammonium phosphate, or you could have the bicarbonates in there as well. Powdered gases that will actually put the fire out again by smothering them, taking away that oxygen, putting that layer there so it can't ignite again. And this particular one, the powder ones, are multi-purpose ones that we can use on A, B, and C fires. So unlike the water where we can only use it on Class A fires, this one we can use it on all three types. And this is one of the more popular extinguishers you'll see out there, especially in offices and buildings, where you have multiple things that can be ignited, multiple fuels of different type characters. We have the Class D. This is a unique one, kind of rare. You don't see this a lot, but it will allow you to put out flammable metal fires. Again, in the video we're going to show you later on, or there's going to be a separate link, you're going to be able to click on that, and when you see the video, it actually shows flammable metal and what happens when water's put on it. So you can see some of the aspects of why you should and shouldn't use certain items. You can see that nozzle there, a distinct feature there as well. Class K, here's your cooking fires. This goes back to usually a lot fire prevention week. You will hear about this. You know, don't put water on grease fires. Well, there's a reason, because it's actually going to make that fire worse. Just like we talked about with the flammable metals, if you put the wrong agent on it, could make it worse. So we don't want to do that with Class K. We don't want to, or the cooking grease fires, we don't want to put that on water on that, because it's going to make the fire actually bigger and worse. The Class K you'll see with a silver extinguisher there. Now it looks very, very similar to the water extinguisher. However, the wand or the nozzle at the end is a little bit different. These are ones you're going to see in restaurants a lot of times that have cook with grease-laden vapors and have fryers. They're going to have this. It acts as like a foam that will go over, blanket the grease, and will stay on top and actually cut off that oxygen so the flammable vapors do not catch fire. This again isn't something you see usually in the home, but we could have grease fires at home, and again we don't want to put water on them because that'll end up making it worse. Now as far as inspection goes, believe it or not, your agency or organization is supposed to look at these extinguishers on a monthly basis and do an inspection. The inspection is very simple. It's not in depth, and anybody can be shown to practice how to do that, and after this training you'll know what to look for to be able to do that as well. You'll look for these six things here. Making sure that A, it's there and present. If the extinguisher bracket's there but there's no extinguisher, obviously we have a problem. Extinguisher's got to be there and located in an obvious, prominent spot where everybody can see it. That's why you'll see when you go to a lot of stores, you'll see the fire extinguisher label on a pillar or column up high. That way from a distance away you know that, hey, here's an extinguisher. So it's really obvious. The gauge itself, making sure it's in green. Making sure it's not discharged or overcharged. It's right in the right spot, ready to go. The pin is in place. I cannot stress enough how important that pin being in place is. I've heard stories, I've worked at places, and unfortunately myself experienced the pin being dislodged from the extinguisher, not meaning to and not when there's a fire, and the extinguisher being discharged. This prevents accidental discharge. And along with the pin staying in there, you have a lock tab that keeps that pin in place, because they will slide out. We obviously want to have it so it's safe, so it doesn't discharge when we don't want it to, but at the same time we don't want it just popping out and accidentally hitting it, discharging it. So that lock tab is in place as well. No obvious signs that the shell or the container itself is damaged, the extinguisher shell itself. If it is under pressure and could discharge in weak areas or weak spots, and we'll show you some pictures of that. And make sure the tag is in date. The tag that's going to be on the fire extinguisher is no more than a year old, and we'll show you a picture of that. Alright, so going through there, making sure it's in the right space, it's visible. You can see on the left hand side it's kind of hidden behind some chairs and a box. Making sure the indicator is there. You can see the green. That yellow gauge or the yellow arrow needs to be within the green. This one's been discharged, so obviously it's no good anymore until it gets new powder and or new gas in there, so it will expel the correct way. We talked about the shell and the breakdown. You can see on the right hand side there where you have it's starting to corrode. That's why one of the requirements is when these are mounted, they're at least 4 inches off of the ground, so you don't have moisture or anything collect on top of there. And no more than 5 foot high, so it's easy accessible for everybody to grab when they do need it. Making sure that that shell is also very important. Nameplate, the pull rings, we have at the top, you see that red lock tab. That's the part we want to make sure is in place. That is replaced yearly by your contractor that does your servicing. So it's fresh, it doesn't dry rot and accidentally break rather easily at that point. It's got to come off easy, but after time they'll break down and they might actually pop off and break themselves just from being there in that position all the time. But that lock tab is important to keep the pin in there, which, like we said, if it's pulled out, then it's free game as far as anybody accidentally hits that, it's going to discharge, and that's what's there to protect, and the lock tab to keep that in place. The different types of nozzles. You have the horn type and you also have the hose type. You want to make sure that they're attached. Some of them screw on, making sure they're attached and not loose. Making sure they're not dry rotted. Making sure nothing's blocking the nozzle itself, that the powder or other agent won't be able to be discharged. The hydrostatic test date and all that's usually done by your vendor. That's done every, well, it varies depending upon the type of agent in the shell. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or I'm sorry, 12 years, depending upon the agent. So that will vary, but that's usually done by them and checked out, and they tell you if it's due for inspection, the detailed inspection. We talked about any missing, if there's any missing, along with it being not charged or in the green, it missing, broken, corroded, or loose. Could also be other problems where we need to get rid of them or get them inspected or repaired. Alright, so annually, well, actually we just went over pretty much the monthly things, those 6 things we're going to check, and then on the back of the tag you can sign off with the date and your initials that it was checked. Now, each year they do have to be inspected. They call it a maintenance. A contractor that has to be certified, especially in New Jersey, has to be certified through the Division of Fire Safety and has to hold a certification from NIFED or NAFED to be able to do fire extinguisher inspections. They come out and they inspect it. They do all the things for the 6 month or the monthly test, but they also check the hydrostatic test dates and go a little bit further than the monthly ones are done. This is where they're going to determine if it's every year that you're doing the annual one, or if it's the 6-year or 12-year inspection or hydro, internal inspection. Hydrostatic testing, this is when we go back to the monthly one where we're looking for that corrosion you saw in the picture. The hydrostatic test is there to make sure that the shell itself can handle the pressure being put under it by the gas so it can expel the agent onto the fire. That again is done by a third-party contractor, and depending upon the style of shell, the contents or agent inside will determine how often that's done. If we look at the general ABC type fire extinguisher, that is normally your every 6 months it's internal, and then every 6 years, sorry. Every 6 years an internal inspection is done, and then every 12 years a hydrostatic test is done. Here's your common tag. I'm sure you guys have seen these tags before. Yeah, usually have on the front, you'll have the dates or years down below with the months, and then you have all the different types of what type fire extinguisher it is. Make sure you see the New Jersey permit number, and that permit number is on there, and you can also look that up on the Division of Fire Safety website to make sure that they are an authorized contractor in the state of New Jersey. It was told to me a while ago that it kind of makes sense that you have to be qualified to do this or trained by somebody that is qualified, because would you want this life-saving device to fail because someone had no clue what they were doing? Kind of like a plumber, electrician, you have to have certain certifications to be them Same concept here for fire safety. Now, how to read this. On the left-hand side, again, at the front of the tag, you'll see the year and the month. Those will be poked out with a hole. The year and the month that are poked out is when it was inspected. So they have to be inspected within a year of that time. So if it's, say, January 2017 is punched out, they have to be inspected by January 31st of 2018, the following year. So the inspection or the punches that you see are when it was inspected last. It has a year with that, and then it has to be punched. It has a year before it expires. You also see void within 1 year. That's the punched one. Now, if it's a fire system, and that's why they say 6 months, it's a cooking system, that's different. But we're talking about fire extinguishers here, so we're going to leave it at that. On the back is where you have the date and inspected by for monthly, and that's what your organization can do, doing those 6 checks to make sure that it's in decent shape. All right, as far as use goes, like many other things in the world, we have acronyms for. We use the PASS acronym. Pull the pin out. So that pin that we had in there to protect it from accidentally going off, pull that out, because now we're going to use it. We want it to go off when we squeeze it. We're going to aim the hose at the base of the fire. The fire might be, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 feet high. If you spray at the top of it, you're not going to actually put the fire out. You need to hit the base of the fire and that'll actually bring the fire down. So you want to aim for the base of the fire with that hose. You want to squeeze that handle that we didn't want done before, because now we purposely want that agent to come out to put the fire out. And we'll take the nozzle and we'll sweep it back and forth at that base of the fire, putting the fire out, discharging the entire extinguisher. Now, we went over what to look for, how to inspect. This is kind of the cookbook instructions of what you want to do if there is a fire, the order of things before we even jump into using the fire extinguisher. Because like we said before, we may not opt to use a fire extinguisher because it might be too big of a fire. So first thing we want to do if we see a fire is call 911 or have somebody call 911. We would rather have the fire department started and get there in case we can't handle that fire, whether we think we can or not. They have sophisticated equipment that even if the fire appears to be out visually, they can use to see if the fire has spread maybe behind the wall or further. So we want them to come out either way, make sure it's safe, make sure the fire is completely out, and we don't have a bigger fire later on. Nothing worse than you thinking you're the hero, you put the fire out, you saved a bunch of money, time, lives, and all that good stuff by using the fire extinguisher, and then come to find out a few hours later there's a fire behind the wall and now the whole building's gone. So it's important to call the fire department, get them out, call 911 first. Then make sure, if you are going to plan on trying to use a fire extinguisher, make sure you have an exit way out. Get everybody out of the building and you have a direct way out if this fire extinguisher does not work. Get the appropriate fire extinguisher with the right agent that's going to put out the right type of fire, the right class of fire, and then discharge using the PASS system, keeping yourself a nice distance from the fire, because not only do we have to worry about heat from the fire, but there's gases that come off of that. They can be toxic and can hurt us to breathe in. Along with the general ABC type fire extinguisher, when they come off, they're going to be coming out with a cloud of powder, and we don't want to be breathing that in either. So make sure we have that distance, make sure we stay away, and after we put that fire out, we get to a well-ventilated and safe area, and we always have that egress path cleared and ready to go in case things don't go well. Never turn your back to the fire, and if you need to, back away there once the fire is extinguished, because the fire can start again. And that's one of the problems when we look at the grease fires, maybe on the top of a stove. We put a lid on it, and we're like, okay, great, fire's contained. And then we go and we open the lid right away, it lights back off. We need to be prepared in case it does light back off again. Use that whole extinguisher and get out of the area. Here is one of the references used in this presentation to get things together and get some information from it. If you have any questions, please check out the comment back on the post, and also check out the few videos on how to use a fire extinguisher, some safety points, and seeing the video on the magnesium fire. Thank you.